Hello everyone and welcome to another discussion. For today's lesson, we will be tackling the next chapter and that is sculpture. But before we begin with our formal lesson, let us tackle first the basic objectives for this chapter. By the end of this discussion, the student should be able to, number one, define the art of sculpture. Second, you should be able to define and understand the different types of sculpture. And the last objective is for you to be able to understand the two basic processes of sculpture. Now, there are three types of sculpture. The first type of sculpture is what we call bust. A bust is a sculpted and painted representation of the upper part of the human body, usually from the head of your subject up until the chest area of your subject. Now, your bust is usually supported by a plinth at the bottom. Now, please look at the picture on your right side. You would see the support or the plinth at the bottom part of the bust. The second type of sculpture is what we call statue. A statue is a life-size or a larger size representation of a person, animal, or scenario. Now, what makes bust different from statue? Number one, the former is only a representation of the upper part of the human body. But when we say statue, it is a whole body or a life-size representation. Now, second, bust only takes humans as its subjects. But when it comes to statue, you can utilize not only humans, you can also use animals or even scenarios as your subject. Now, please look at the right side of your PowerPoint. That is an example of a statue. So that is the commemorative monument of peace and unity by Kublai Millan. So it is located in front of San Pedro Church. The third type of sculpture is architectural sculpture. Now, when we say architectural sculpture, it is a universal classification used to describe a structural design, such as buildings, bridges, burial chambers, and other big projects. Now, our example for architectural sculpture is the City Hall of Davao. Now that I have given you an example of an architectural sculpture, which is the City Hall of Davao, let us briefly discuss the rich history of our City Hall. Now, the first City Hall structure was built in 1926, 10 years before the city became a chartered city in 1936. It was built as a municipal hall of Davao. Now, the structure was designed by architect Valencia and it was overseen by engineer Santiago Arteaga. Now, the municipal hall was sponsored by the Davao JCs. But sadly, in 1945, during the liberation of the Philippines from the Japanese forces, the City Hall of Davao was destroyed, and it took 2 years to reconstruct the building until it was completely rebuilt back to its original form in 1947. Now, what we have right now and what we see right now is actually a reconstructed 1947 version of the building. So, how old our City Hall building is? It's already 73 years old. Now, a lot of people may ask, now given that how progressive Davao City is, why didn't our LGU designated or allotted funds to be able to modernize the structure of our City Hall building? Now, because of its rich history, the City Hall of Davao is now considered a historical landmark. Now, that is the answer. Now, even though we have money, yes, we have, but then, given it is considered as a historical landmark, we cannot destroy, we cannot even alter the design of the building because the historical value will decrease. Now, this landmark was given to the City Hall in 2012 by the National Historical commission. The marker is actually located at the left side of the entrance of the City Hall building. Now, the fourth type of sculpture is what we call relief sculpture. This type of sculpture is projected into three-dimensional space. Now, the back of a relief sculpture is not meant to be seen, and the entire design can be understood from a frontal view. Now, there are three different types of relief sculpture. The first one is what we call high relief. Now, in high relief, the figures in the sculpture are dramatically raised from the background. They are sometimes nearly sculpted in the round. The second type of relief sculpture is bas relief. Bas relief is also referred as low relief. Now, it is characterized by figures that are only slightly raised from the surface of the background. The last type of relief sculpture is what we call sunken relief. Sunken relief is also referred as incise or intaglio relief. Now, sunken relief sculpture is a kind of relief that is created by having an image carved below the surface of the sculpture. Now, sunken relief is a common pattern when it comes to Egyptian wall sculptures. Now, there are two basic types of sculptural processes. Now, the first type is what we call subtractive process. Subtractive process happens when the material is either removed or carved out from the base material. Now, the perfect example of a sculptural style under the subtractive process is carving. And the second type is what we call additive process. Additive process happens when the material is added onto your base material. Now, an example of a sculptural style under the additive process is casting. Now, for the next slides, we will be tackling the four different sculptural styles. Number one, we have carving. Number two, we have casting. Three, we have modeling or molding. And number four, we have assembling and constructing. So let us start with the two types of carving. The first type of carving is stone carving. Now, stone carving is an ancient activity where pieces of rough natural stone are shaped by the removal of stone. Now, stone has been utilized by our ancestors as material for sculpture for the following reasons.